As the young man lay dying, he ground his teeth together while salty tears raced down his bleeding face. His shaking hand held the card close to his heart, refusing to let go even as his last bit of hope began to fade. "My name is Ameki Leo," he introduced himself while standing among the dead bodies of his teammates, an amateur player without any skill. Leo stood in the empty ruins, remembering the horror as his mind flashed with a warning about how his whole team was destroyed. He only managed to gasp as that thing, a monster with countless arms, lunged at him. The system declared the enemy's identity a total mystery, and while it let out a savage roar, Leo thought back to how the world had merged with the game Paradise Eden a decade ago, leading to this fatal clash. After that, dungeons and monsters popped up everywhere, creating a new generation of people called players. Let's go back 2 hours to a lonely place called the Unlivable Zone. A hot-headed man shouted at the group to stop being lazy if they wanted the prize, then turned to scold Leo, the guy with glasses, telling him to hurry up, which left Leo stuttering a nervous "yes, sir," while 2 other players whisper behind him, looking down on the unclassed newcomer just there for his escape skills. Leo sighed, muttering to himself that it was a real pain while silently fixing his glasses. They stood alone in a dungeon unlike any other. This B-rank dungeon was deadly, offered huge rewards, and no one had ever finished it. Leo remembered this spot well, for it was here he once ran to become a player, only to fail in finding his special class. "So, I've been stuck watching from the sidelines for years," he thought with a bitter taste as he saw the team celebrating. The B-rank mage and leader Luca turned to ask Leo about the situation, and Leo, staying professional, replied that their position was perfect for making a fortune since the area between Sotaburai and the city center was full of resources and only held weak monsters. Luca waved Leo off with a grin, insisting they march straight to the city to crush this B-rank dungeon in one go, which froze Leo in horror since he had no desire to throw his life away. The blonde mage casually waved his hand and said, "Come on, lead the way," even as Leo frantically tried to stop him by shouting, "Please wait. Nanan isn't just any B-rank dungeon. The city center info is 10 years old, so we can't clear it. I thought we needed to check on the monsters first, but my suggestion was met only with silence and cold shoulders from the whole team." Suddenly, a powerful shove threw Leo backward, and he crashed hard onto his back. Luca grabbed the guy by the throat, lifted him up, and snarled, "Listen here, you useless bum. Shut up, do your job, and stop trying to conquer this dungeon with that cruel look in your eyes, or I'll choke you until you can't even gasp for air." Luca slammed him to the ground and sneered, "You're only getting special treatment because you survived that escape." Although he agreed to head to the city center, Leo was already planning his escape, knowing he had to find a way to bolt. Suddenly, a freezing cold blade was pressed right up against his face. Luca leaned close, his voice dripping with threat, demanding to know if you were plotting something before declaring you worthless without his lead, leaving Leo too scared to speak and only able to whisper his agreement. Luca gripped his sword handle so hard his knuckles turned white, showing that things were getting much worse. He stood up with a sneer, brushing dust from his hands as if they had just touched trash, muttering, "How disgusting. You've made my hands dirty." Leo sat on the ground, gritting his teeth against the mockery of his teammates, vowing to find a way out no matter what it took. At last, the team reached the ruined heart of a dead city. Standing before the site, Luca casually shrugged and said he saw no difference, while inside, Leo secretly cursed him as an idiot for walking into a monster's den and promised to run the moment the fight began. All of a sudden, a teammate shouted in fear as a B-rank monster burst through the rubble. Soon the whole team found themselves trapped by a roaring pack of giant monsters charging straight at them. Luca just smirked as fire burst from his palm, telling everyone to stay calm. He struck with a devastating blow while boasting, "They're just B-rank targets, easy wins." But watching from afar, Leo couldn't help but marvel at how close a B-rank mage could get to true A-rank power. He secretly wanted that power, but suddenly felt something strange. Suddenly, a bright green glow wrapped around Leo as his power flared up with a violent start. He whispered to himself that a terrifying monster was right behind him. Leo snapped back to reality and sprinted to warn Luca that something huge was coming, shouting that they had to leave right now. Luca waved the man away with a sneer, thinking it ridiculous for someone so lowly to talk about finding him. Suddenly, the ground started to split open with eerie flashes of light right under their feet. The whole group froze in terror when they saw the ground start to crumble beneath their feet. The ground broke apart, sending everyone tumbling down into the dark void below. The moment their feet touched the dirt, Luca lunged forward, seizing Leo by the collar and screaming, You led us into a trap, didn't you? I'm going to kill you. But then, everyone looked up to see a towering monster with many arms and glowing red eyes standing in the dark. Leo stared in shock, realizing his sharp sense of detection had completely disappeared. Luca tackled him to the ground, putting the punishment on hold to deal with the new danger. A creepy voice called out from the dark, "Hey humans, want to play a game?" As the female boss monster finally showed herself on her broken throne, making the whole team realize their real mission. A glowing board popped up, daring you to smash the mysterious object and grab the secret treasure waiting inside. The arrogant fire mage roared as he blasted a spell that would turn everything to ash. Once Mikey Leo could only mutter a confused, "Huh." After a scary attack made his target disappear, Lucas skeptically asked if it had vanished or been fixed, only to scream that it was still out there as a giant, shadowy ghost suddenly loomed behind them. A player with white hair suddenly broke into a cold sweat as he felt a terrifying wave of killing intent rising up. The giant monster with many arms crashed down and its spooky voice shouted, "You naughty thing. Don't be a coward. It's nothing special." So a shoulder-armored swordsman roared and charged into a deadly fight with his teammate. But a stitched-up arm stopped his attack right in its tracks. The female monster snatched the attackers, giggling and asking, "Shall we play a game?" She let out a wild, roaring laugh as she smashed them, having such a blast. Mike Leo collapsed to the ground in horror, wondering if she had really killed everyone. He rushed to use his analysis skill, but the screen came back blank with no species, level, or ability shown at all. What the hell is going on? Mike Leo screamed as a surprise attack sent him flying through the air. He smashed right into the wall, cracking it with the force of the hit. Mike Leo dropped to the floor, completely unable to fight back against the enemy. Among the fallen, the female monster stopped in her tracks, as if she had just spotted something important. The familiar scent hit me, and she licked her lips suggestively from the ground before a microphone appeared, causing Leo to tremble as he looked up into the monster's glowing red eye. The female monster crouched down and whispered into the screaming boy's ear, "Daddy, is that you?" As Leo's mind raced in denial, insisting, "I have a daughter this old," and shouting, No, that's absurd," while her echoing voice fueled his worst fears with, "Found you, Daddy." Forcing himself to stay cool and sweating profusely, Leo pushed up his glasses and told himself, "I have a way out of this mess," until the monster, calling herself Suzuko, exclaimed, "Daddy, let's go home," and began stuffing another player in her mouth while countless stitched arms lunged at Leo, who could only scream in despair as she asked, "How did it come to this?" before being trapped in a giant palm, where Suzuko wheedled, "Be a good boy. Listen to Daddy." And he was dropped into a gaping maw with his last thought flashing, "Is this how I can't help but think that dying that way was just plain silly." In the digital world, Leo floated freely as a system chime announced his new title, Dreadkeeper. He blinked open his eyes, confused, wondering how he wasn't dead after being eaten. Leo jumped up from the couch, pressed his hand to his chest, and realized something impossible. I wasn't dead. Leo stood up and looked around his familiar home as the TV announced it was January 30th, 2011 at 4 p.m., but he stared in shock, confused because his prayers for a paradise life in 5 hours and a 10-year rewind seemed to have finally come true, with a glowing red stream appearing before him. Red pixel blocks wrapped around his hand, showing that something strange was forcing its way inside. Right behind him, through the fuzzy noise on the screen, Suzuko popped up with her creepy, familiar voice, calling out Daddy Tilda. A strangled noise came out as Leo fell to the floor. "So hungry," Suzuko's ghostly voice echoed as she appeared, leaving Mikey Leo stunned and wondering why. Leo lay on the floor, bewildered and asking what was happening, only to see countless stitched arms reach out to grab him, while Suzuko whispered that Daddy had sent Tilda, flooding his mind with terrifying memories and causing him to despair as Suzuko's sharp fingers extended to snatch him. She clutched Leo close, kissing his cheek happily and enjoying the smell of Daddy. Suzuko gently lifted him into her palm and asked with innocent hunger, "So, what's for dinner?" "What the hell?" Leo broke into a cold sweat as the monster urged him to give food as an escape, so he yelled, "Calm down. I'll do something," and received an eager reply, "All right," before Suzuko tilted her head curiously at the mountain of fried chicken and asked, "What is this?" To which Leo, with a forced smile, presented his offering and said, "All of this is for you, Suzuko," while Tilda the monster cheered with joy and embraced her tiny daddy. Suzuko pressed her cheek against Leo, whispering, "I love you, Daddy," and froze him with her touch. He still couldn't believe this crazy reality, wondering if it was real or just an illusion, before Suzuko's arm reached out without hesitation to grab the steaming bucket of fried chicken. She started digging into the fancy food with great enjoyment. As Suzuko ate her food, Leo wondered if she was already full, but then a system panel popped up, and suddenly he realized he had gotten a job. The information was shown clearly, revealing a unique Dread Keeper who was awakened by defeating the B-rank boss Suzuko. Leo's eyes sparkled with a scary idea, wondering what would happen if her condition got worse. Leo was so lost in thought that he wondered if controlling Suzuko would let him command the other bosses too. But the cold truth struck hard when Suzuko, with glowing red eyes, squeezed him tight and called out, "Daddy Tilda." The system confirmed that Tilda, the monster girl who was still starving despite her hunger, was wondering what she should eat. Leo set his plan aside for later and chose to make her happy first. He softly patted her head and smiled to tell her, "Suzuko, you just need to be patient." The boy reached out his hand to promise a full meal, saying there was no need to rush and that he'd let you eat your fill. With a dark scheme taking shape in his mind, he decided to act as a caring father to help Suzuko grow, turning the dungeon crawl into a piece of cake. Leo's tiny move sparked a big ripple, making Suzuko gasp in surprise while Daddy patted my head. He froze in his tracks, completely shocked by the look on her face. Overjoyed, Suzuko lifted Leo into a tight hug and promised that Tilda and she would both be good girls. Leo was so overwhelmed by her love that he could barely get the words out, stammering, "First, put Daddy down. I can't breathe." Just then, an urgent news report on TV made him turn around in surprise. He stared in horror at the static-filled screen, a bad feeling whispering, "No way." So Leo rushed to the window, hoping his fears weren't real. "Really?" he cried as the cruel truth hit him hard, sending the dungeon crashing down even sooner, turning the city into a dark shadow, swallowed by the Black Forest. Suddenly, green sparks started to swirl and pile up right in the middle of the room. The energy swirled together until it grew into a hideous monster. A truly disgusting monster with endless eyes suddenly popped up right in front of Leo. The system announced as the monster named Black Forest let out a deafening roar and threw Leo backward. Leo tumbled to the ground in shock. "What?" While Suzuko darted past the defeated enemy, screaming with bloodthirsty red eyes, "You maggots! Get lost!" before a system notification confirmed the threat was neutralized. Right away, Suzuko lunged at Leo with a crazy laugh, shouting, "Haha, Tilda, Daddy belongs to me." Leo let out a terrified scream and begged, "Put me down." Once he put down the pen, he admitted defeat and said he'd get it ready right away for Suzuko, who asked if it was finally time to eat. Suddenly, a sudden tremor shook the ground, leaving Suzuko confused and wondering what could possibly cause it. Leo gripped his head as a strange feeling washed over him, making him mutter, "What on earth is going on?" The system screamed a warning that a strange, grown monster had been found and the Black Forest's old curse had been awakened. A curse? Leo froze as he read the terrifying condition that if he wasn't free within 72 hours, he would be locked away forever in the Black Forest, just as thorny vines erupted from the ground and the room shook violently, hurling them both. Out of the tangled vines, scary plant monsters with cold green eyes started to take shape. Leo looked around in despair, wondering what kind of mess he was in, and thought anxiously that he still hadn't sorted out Suzuko's situation. In a sharp contrast, Suzuko bounded forward, shouting with pure excitement, "Food!" Revealing her sharp teeth, she licked her lips hungrily and said, "Looks delicious, Tilda," before swinging her many arms at the plant monsters without a second thought. Suzuko ran headlong into the plant monsters, where countless arms flailed wildly around her in a frenzy. As she shoved the creature in her mouth, a glowing message popped up telling her she'd gained experience. A happy roar filled the air as Suzuko's hunger bar shot straight up. "Super delicious, Tilda," she whispered, gaining a wild new ability after a feast. Suzuko slammed her hand down on the ground and easily swept the monster's remains out of the way. As Leo watched the screen, a smile spread across her face, realizing she had finally found a way to satisfy her hunger by eating monsters. But his happiness didn't last long because the curse struck again, and he knew he had to do something about it. He stared around in disbelief, realizing he was totally lost deep inside the Black Forest dungeon when he should have been somewhere else entirely. Leo's eyes sparked with resolve as he realized the one thing that changed everything. Suzuko was there. Just then, Suzuko innocently offered, "Daddy Tilda wants some to eat," making him only able to refuse. "No, Suzuko, you eat it." But suddenly a sinister smile appeared on the monster girl's lips as Leo's thoughts suddenly became clear amidst the encrypted space, wondering if the dungeon wants to eliminate Suzuko. "So it's trying to kill my master, which is me," He cried out in despair as he held his head, knowing he had just 72 hours to escape or clear the dungeon. Mikey Leo gave up under the weight of it all, leaving Suzuko and me to face the terrifying task of taming this giant forest on our own. Suddenly, a sudden surge of killing intent hit him, leaving him shouting "what?" in shock as a giant plant monster loomed before him, prompting him to cry "no way," until Suzuko roared "Daddy!" and unleashed her new skill. Suddenly, a storm of sharp plant blades shot out, sweeping everything away to guard the young man. Suzuko cheered with delight, not bad at all, then turned as the emerald vines raced across the battlefield to ask her father if he was okay, and he proudly said he was fine because she did a great job, making him realize that she had just learned Kyo's special skill. Suddenly, blue balls of light started to circle him, surprising him as they began to glow. Suddenly, a vine lunged at Mikey Leo, who screamed to back away before it slammed into a tall building and blew up. The story jumped back to the past, 24 hours after the Black Forest swallowed the whole of Nara City whole. Amidst the ruins, Lucas stood up to reassure the crowd, declaring that the enemy was weak because he had once tested them, and commanding everyone to obey, but his words were soon drowned out by panic as a new threat emerged, scattering the people in fear. Luca froze in shock, sweat pouring down his face as he realized the enemy was a level 2 Kyo. He stood before a huge plant monster that was roaring with power. Luca's followers screamed in despair, wondering what on earth was happening since it looked nothing like the earlier ones. Luca fought to keep his voice steady, shouting, "Calm down, there's a way to fix this," before taking a deep breath and pulling every ounce of strength he could find. He glanced up at the sky and yelled, "Wielder of a class," causing a beam of blue light to drop from above and land right on the monster. A blast of raw power ripped through the earth, swallowing a level 2 Kyo on a rocky ledge, while the calm F-rank mage Hayashi Miki stepped forward to stare at the fallen beast and declare an easy victory. Lucas stood tall on the defeated monster's body, lifting his axe high while shouting, "Look what I told you! Obey me and we win easy," as the cheering crowd below celebrated the girl who saved them all. Miki quietly fixed her hat, thinking to herself, "This guy is really good at manipulating people. We've only known each other for a day," just as two plant monsters lunged out of the darkness to knock the mage down. After a mysterious burst of power saved her, Miki sat on the ground and asked Luca, who stood over defeated monsters, exactly who he was and why he helped. Luca smiled confidently and explained that as a beta tester, he was gathering allies like her special class to clear the dungeon. But Miki looked at him skeptically, wondering if a regular office worker could really be a hero as the monsters only seemed to get stronger. Back in the present, Suzuko was having the time of her life, commanding a massive tree branch that stretched up into the sky. Held tightly by Suzuko's endless arms, a Mike Leo panicked as the innocent monster girl asked, "Daddy, can we do it again?" Suddenly, memories of Luca from 10 years ago flooded back, making Leo smirk and think that clearing the dungeon with him might not be such a bad idea. Just as they settled down, a violent shake hit the ground and woke them both up instantly. From below, a swarm of plant monsters climbed the tree trunk, making Suzuko cackle as she licked her lips and called them delicious, while Mike Leo turned pale and the other survivors stared up in horror at the shaking giant tree, completely confused by what was happening. Hayashi Miki wiped her sweat and muttered that everyone overreacted, while Luca stared up at the sky in terror as the giant tree trunk twisted and snapped in half with a deafening roar. Seeing what was happening, Luca screamed out his teammate's name, Hayashi Miki. Miki froze in confusion just as a giant chunk of wood and rock crashed down from above, right before causing a huge mess. Dust swirled around, swallowing up a ruined corner of the city. Lost in a barren wasteland, Leo woke up dazed and thought, "I'm still alive," until a voice called out from above with a familiar feel, "Hey kid." Right away, Hayashi Miki lunged forward and grabbed Leo hard, shouting, "Don't even think about moving." Leo stumbled over his words in that awkward moment, but it was just a simple accident. Miki growled in anger, "Did you chop down that tree?" But Leo shook his head and said, "You got it wrong. It was just a pure coincidence." Suddenly, a cry for "Daddy" rang out, and a powerful shove knocked Miki to the ground, leaving her frozen in shock. From the thick smoke, Suzuko burst out in her multi-armed monster shape, laughing crazily while both Hayashi Miki and a Mike Leo stood frozen in horror, staring at the giant thing that was now right there. A Mike Leo jumped in fast to calm things down and said, "Suzuko, come on now." But Hayashi Miki had already jumped up to block him and shouted, "Leave it to me," her eyes blazing with the fierce promise that she would protect the heroes from the monster. Suzuko stared in shock as Hayashi Miki confidently challenged her. Mike Leo froze, his mind reeling in shock as he realized she had mistaken Suzuko for a foe. Without saying a single word, Hayashi Miki surged forward as blue energy exploded around him. A raging swirl of magic wrapped around Suzuko. The terrifying monster was locked away in a freezing cage, looking completely beaten down. Careful! Mikey Leo screamed in panic as Suzuko tilted her head in confusion, not noticing the ice sword already deep inside her back. Seeing a gap, Hayashi Miki let out a roar and struck the final blow. Gotcha! She smirked with triumph as the attack failed, then blasted Miki back with a swirl of blue light before turning to Leo and asking, Daddy, are you worried about me? It's not that I'm worried about her. A thought Mike mumbled before rushing toward Miki and asking, Hey, are you all right? The young man was so worried he secretly prayed, hoping she wasn't dead. Luckily, Hayashi Miki was just knocked out after the counterattack. Leo rubbed his hands in frustration as Suzuko leaned in with her tongue out, asking if she could eat her, only for Leo to firmly say no and help Miki up, realizing she was part of Luca's group. A plan popped into his head. If he saved her, Luca would let him join his crew without trouble. But the plan had a fatal flaw, so he turned to Suzuko and warned that everything would be ruined if they found out about you. Then he asked for a favor. Amikio begged, Can you hide for just a little while? Suzuko tilted her head as if to ask why, while Leo just smiled meaningfully, leaving Tilda wondering what else could possibly be the reason. Mike Leo beamed with a bright, promising smile and said, If you hide well, I'll treat you to a delicious meal. Suzuko happily showed off her scary shape, but Leo quickly whispered that he would stay hidden while the glowing green curse mark faded away. Leo jumped with a start, noticing the curse fading and wondering if it was Suzuko hiding behind it. A daring idea sparked in the young man's mind. Suzuko should hide while he used Luca's team to locate the boss and then play his trump card to end it. Meanwhile, Hayashi Miki slowly opened her eyes, and still feeling dazed, she sat up abruptly, clutching her head and groaning in pain. Leo rushed over with a worried look, exclaiming, Oh, you're awake. I'm so glad you're okay. When Miki asked about the monster, Leo casually said, Ah, thanks to you. It ran away, leaving Hayashi Miki pointing at herself in confusion, totally unaware of what had happened. Even though she wasn't sure what had happened, she pulled on her cap and shrugged, Whatever, while Miki stood up, acting like an older sister, and warned, This place is dangerous. Let's go somewhere safer, as Leo silently thought out loud while Miki turned around to ask his name. After choosing a fake name, he answered, I'm Himogen, and then Miki introduced herself too. As Miki shook Suzuko's hand, her spirit accidentally brushed against hers. What is this? Suzuko whispered, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, while Leo instantly commanded the giant monster behind him to feed and follow them silently, which the girl accepted with a quiet, resigned nod. Hayashi Miki marched the group forward, totally clueless that she was striding between the prey and the real hunter. Beneath the crescent moon, ghostly tree branches stretched out over the warehouse, promising a restless night. In the makeshift base, Luca paced with impatience, demanding a mission report from teams 3 and 4 while asking if they had found her yet. A member bowed his head with worried eyes to tell them that Hayashi Miki is still missing and being searched for. Luca's rage exploded, and he screamed to hurry up and find her, because without Miki, his entire team would have been wiped out long ago. The whole group of survivors shook in fear before their angry leader, scrambling to find something comforting to say. But deep inside, all Luca could think was to pray that Miki would stay safe. Right then, a voice I knew called from the doorway, so there was no need to look any further. Hayashi Miki came back, waving a bold hello and calling out to her friends, Yo and Luca. Luca's face relaxed and burst with joy, but then he just said, Miki. He opened his arms wide, his voice thick with emotion as he embraced his most important teammate, then turned to the stranger with Miki to ask if the boy was his little brother, while Miki simply explained he'd save him on the way, not realizing that Suzuko's quiet spirit was whispering a secret that only Mike Leo could hear. The young man gave a friendly smile and introduced himself as Himogen, though in his heart he was really saying, Long time no see, Luca, before Leo eagerly agreed to join, and Luca shook his hand without any doubt. The leader smiled politely while his heart raced with suspicion about that brat, so he quietly pulled out his secret trump card to see who he really is. Before diving into the data analysis, Ame Leo offered an innocent smile and asked, Is there anything I can help with? But the attempt failed completely, leaving him staring at a glaring red error screen. Luca ignored his doubts for a second, then gave Leo a smug pat on the head and introduced himself as the boss. Luca's sharp ability to analyze things suddenly failed, leaving him unable to spot the target. "Yes, boss," Leo said with a nod, while Luca watched in secret shock that he couldn't read the notes. A string of warning screens flashed up as Luca's hard work went completely to waste. Luca snarled as he yanked at Leo's hair, shouting, "Let's see if you can handle the good job I have for you." Suddenly, a warped blue warning screen flashed right in front of Luca's eyes. Luca broke out in a cold sweat, utterly bewildered because it failed every single time and he had no idea what was going on. Suddenly, Luca hit the ground, sending Mike Leo into a panic as Luca gripped his head in pain. Suzuko showed her monster face behind Leo as he reached out to ask if he was okay. Just then, an invisible mental blast slammed Luca to the ground with a piercing scream. Suddenly, the whole group went quiet as they stared at their leader, who had just collapsed, leaving everyone confused and wondering why this happened. Hayashi Miki dashed over to a confused Luca and asked, "What's going on?" Tilda whispered to Suzuko that she just scared Leo a little while he smiled to himself, wondering if Suzuko did it, until a terrifying noise from outside suddenly startled everyone. Over there, a determined foot slammed hard against the ground. A huge explosion blew up and tossed the two fighting players into the air. Luca's group bolted outside in horror to see the factory burst into flames and explode. "What's going on?" Luca yelled, his panic rising as chaos surrounded him. Amidst the roaring fire, a huge tree reached its branches up while a survivor yelled, "What the hell is that?" Suzuko worriedly asked, "The tree is moving. Dad, should we run?" But Mikey Leo reassured her, "No, wait. My detection ability is still active." Inside the swirling energy vortex, Leo saw that the monsters were getting agitated and couldn't stop wondering what was making them so angry. Suddenly, a huge burst of fire shot out from the broken factory. Leo spun around, looking shocked and scared as he saw the fire. Leo screamed at the survivors to stay back from the raging flames. In the middle of the chaos, he shouted a warning that a level 3 wood elemental demon was on its way. From inside the fierce fire, a burning claw stretched out. A massive monster made of wood and fire suddenly appeared, roaring so loud it shook the ground. Seeing that scene left Luca stunned and suspicious, wondering how the kid knew that maybe he had a saving power, just like him. Luca's crazy dream had Leo and Hayashimiki mocking him and stealing his spot as their leader. He couldn't stop thinking that Leo was secretly planning to take the top spot and steal all the rewards. A message flashed in Luca's mind, reminding him that every dungeon needs only one unique hero. His eyes flashed with anger as Luca summoned an energy sword and muttered a curse, promising to make them regret entering his dungeon. Back in the real world, he slashed his sword and screamed at the crowd, "Listen to me. Start the counterattack." But Hayashi Miki could only shout a warning to Luca just before he was tossed away. A scary boom blew up Luca's whole counterattack team. Miki stepped up to Leo and declared, "We can no longer trust Luca." Then he quickly told him to get everyone out of there. She yanked his collar and growled, "Understand," before getting panicked, "All right." Mike Leo felt a scary warning that something was wrong, because even though the curse was getting weaker, the wood demons were still growing stronger. Just as a terrifying explosion burst into a sea of fire, Hayashi Miki rushed forward to shield him, while a level 3 wood elemental demon with a blazing body roared in fury. "Himen, speed up!" Hayashi Miki cried, while Leo tripped over his own feet. The young man nervously glanced back, wondering if she'd tell him to run, only to see Suzuko's ghostly form appear right behind him, screaming that she was so hungry she couldn't help herself and would eat them right then. Her ugly arms crashed down on the floor, pushing her forward to rush at him. Delicious Tilda Suzuko swooped past a shocked Mike Leo and charged straight at the enemy. A deadly river of fire crashed into a strange assault, sending a scary shockwave flying everywhere. Hayashi Miki froze in shock as she realized the monster from before, Suzuko, was being swallowed by the demon's fire while the enemy's wild laughter echoed, turning the scene into a full barbecue. Instead of burning up, Suzuko just opened her mouth wide and happily swallowed the fire. Mike Leo sighed helplessly, telling Suzuko that her dad was in danger while she just thought about eating, warning that the curse would get stronger again. Then he remembered his only power, a rookie's special ability to sync with his weapon. A funny memory popped up, showing that he could only tame the toughest monsters. A bright idea struck Mikey Leo's mind. If he can control the boss of the Black Forest, maybe the curse will break in the real world. But when Hayashi Miki tried to grab him to drag him away, Mike Leo surprisingly pushed her hand away, telling her, "Miki, this is your chance. Run." His eyes hardened as Leo yelled that Luca knew the boss's location. So despite the risk, he and Hayashi Miki decided to rush off and find Luca while the monsters were distracted. Hold on tight, Hayashi Miki yelled as she grabbed Mikey Leo and launched them forward like a speeding arrow. Meanwhile, deep in the ruined tunnels, a ghost with flowing silver hair shouted, "I found you, Tilda," before gently touching a shadowy form and whispering a single word. "Dad!" cried the giggling, silver-haired monster, her voice cutting through the sea of carnivorous flowers to announce the true boss's arrival. While Luca's team stood atop the fallen monsters, they bragged that they had finally found the enemy's hiding spot. Luca smirked to himself, caring only for the reward and ready to leave that brat behind so he could clear the dungeon all by himself. Just then, a sharp pain hit everyone's heads, and the whole group of survivors fell down. Even Luca wasn't safe. The hidden attack left him frozen in shock, wondering what on earth had just happened. Deep within the chaos, a ghostly eye opened wide and shot out a stream of green psychic energy. Luca's whole group was silenced, their eyes burning with a deadly blue glow. Luca yelled, "Don't panic," trying to calm his former comrades. Even though it was dangerous, the huge reward made Luca greedy and ready to take the challenge. One person in the group frantically shouted at the level 3 monster, "How are we ever going to win this?" His pride was hurt, and Luca's eyes flashed with a dark, deadly anger at whoever dared to doubt him. "What a terrible sight," he grumbled before shockingly turning and killing his own friend right in front of everyone. Right after that cruel act, a system message popped up, giving Luca a chance to pick a new job. The rest of the group stared in horror at their leader, covered in blood, as they stammered, "Sir Luca, what have you done?" Killing a wood elemental only netted a few hundred points, while killing a weak NPC earned 1,000. So Luca grinned wildly and promised that if he couldn't beat the boss, he'd steal points from all of them. Mickey Leo asked, "Is it here?" while both of them looked down at the mess left by a fierce fight. Hayashi Miki screamed, "He's lost his mind. Run," as sheer terror gripped her at the sight before them. She tried to run away, but Hayashi Miki instead sprinted straight at Luca, who was standing right in the middle of a battlefield covered in dead bodies. "Luca!" she shouted as she stood before her old friend, who was clutching the throat of the final survivor. "You've got it wrong, Mickey," Luca said, twisting his smile into something not so nice. "You promised to clear the dungeon with us, yet now you're slaughtering your own friends and have completely lost your mind." "They're the crazy ones," he said calmly, pointing out the sweet scent of the flowers. "What about the smell of flowers?" Hayashi Miki asked, confused and with sweat beading on her forehead. "Take a breath and you'll turn into the boss's minion, which is exactly why I have to kill him." Luca's hand squeezed the sword hilt tight. "Mickey, the truth is I'm one of those little minions now, and you have to get rid of me." She frantically snatched the sharp blade as she wondered how things went so wrong and begged to fight the boss together. Luca shrugged her off, but Mickey clutched his shirt and shouted, "You're a beta tester, aren't you? There has to be another way, right? Don't give up. If you don't kill me," Luca whispered in the shadows, "there's another way." He pulled her close to whisper the terrifying words, "I'll kill you," as Luca's eyes turned a deadly red, showing his true, dark self. Hayashi Miki let out a scream of terror, just as a deadly beam of light shot right through her. Luca pinned her to the broken ground with his sword. "Luca, you," she whispered softly, but the madman only roared back at her. "You're just an NPC, so how dare you lecture me, the true protagonist?" He slammed his sword down and shouted, "I saved you just to get that top-tier job." "Too bad, Mickey, but at least you can play your final part," Luca said as he slid a card into the system, which instantly asked, "Is the target still alive?" Before Hayashi Miki could scream in agony, a stream of green energy was violently ripped from her body as Luca forcibly took her profession card. Luca gasped in joy as the golden card of the rare S-rank profession flew into his hand. Suddenly, a voice rang out calling for Mickey to stop, which startled Luca. Mikey Leo had just arrived, frozen in shock at the noise and chaos around him. He started sweating and stuttering, wondering if he had caught me a really bad moment. Luca grinned and held out the card he'd just stolen, while Mike Leo forced a laugh and waved his hands frantically, acting confused by what Luca was saying. "It's no use, you fool," Luca sneered, his voice dripping with mockery as he boasted, "I'm a far better actor than you." Mike Leo watched Luca act strange and felt bad for Mickey, but he knew he had to get out of there. But Luca stood in his way, radiating a scary power that made it clear you weren't leaving. Leo was frozen in horror as he realized that Luca had no profession, trapped by an unseen force. Luca smirked, thinking I was trying to take his spot, but he couldn't believe I wouldn't even look at Mickey's S-rank power. Mikey Leo stood frozen, completely lost by the stranger's strange words and wondering just what on earth Mickey's strength could possibly mean. Luca's wild grin dominated the view, just as he dropped the bombshell. The dungeon transformed because we are both saviors. Mike Leo froze, and a dizzying parade of travelers, ranging from heroes to madmen, raced through his mind. His skin turned cold and clammy as he suddenly understood that if Luca was the kind of person who brings disaster, everything Luca did now made perfect sense. While Luca doubted his reasons, Leo secretly counted down the seconds until Suzuko got there to save him, then suddenly looked up with a grin and admitted he'd done it all just to talk, only to then brag about sneaking into the dungeon to mess with its rules. Luca grinned with a smug look, clearly happy that his plan was going perfectly. Thinking that this fool believes everything I say, Mike Leo decided to play the part all the way to the end. He burst into an arrogant laugh, boasting that thanks to me, this dungeon has become even more thrilling. Luca propped his chin on his hand with a cunning grin, finding the shifting rewards fascinating, though the reality was far more brutal, as the story flashed back to the moment he used his power to snatch Hayashi Miki. Hayashi Miki screamed in despair. "Are you two working together? You're both crazy," while being held down. "Shut up," Luca screamed, then smashed his foot hard against her face. Watching that scene, Leo just sighed to himself. Even Miki believed me, as a glowing S-rank job card was pulled from Hayashi Miki's body, and Luca shouted about the power of a job while staring at the girl pierced by a sword. He grinned victoriously, clutching the card he just snatched, proving that picking a lock is way faster than waiting around. Back in the present, Luca reached out with his newfound power to a Mike Leo and asked, "Shall we work together?" But a Mike Leo answered by glowing with a mysterious green aura that knocked Luca down in surprise. "Damn it, what did you do?" Luca roared as his men were suddenly attacked by plant monsters. In the middle of the chaos, a Mike Leo sneered at the summoner, "Cooperate," and kept up his fake act, while Luca, shaking but laughing madly, mocked the child's terrible joke. As if I'd ever believe that, he lunged forward with a punch so fast that Mike Leo couldn't even move fast enough to dodge it. Luca's face twisted into a snarl as he roared, declaring he'd never work with me, just as the ground suddenly shook with a terrifying tremor. Out of a cloud of dust, a giant monster with many arms popped up and grabbed a person who was screaming loudly. They caught Luca, who screamed in terror, begging them to stop because he was the one who saved them. Suzuko showed her monstrous true form and squeezed the so-called savior, who turned out to be useless to her. She wore a scary grin while her voice echoed in everyone's head, saying she'd come to find Dad. Luca was stunned as he looked down at Leo, who was getting up and stammering, "Wait, don't tell me you." Mikey Leo grinned and gave a thumbs up, "And I'm just his dad." With Luca completely broken and frantically begging for a way to help his dad, Suzuko roared in anger and punished the one who dared to insult her master. Right after she let out a loud scream, the monster girl suddenly felt so sleepy that she asked her dad if they could go to bed. "Sure, Amiki," Leo replied, "but first, Suzuko, take care of these guys." "Yes, Dad," she happily agreed, scooping up the tiny monsters with her arms while Leo wondered in the dark what they really were, hoping that since they haven't met the boss yet, they might just get out of here. Right after that, a Mikey Leo sprinted frantically toward Hayashi Miki, who was lying on the ground, and shouted, "Miki, are you okay?" With gasping breath and unfocused red eyes, Hayashi Miki could do nothing but let out a weak cry. The boy froze in shock, cold sweat soaking him as he realized the terrifying truth. A cold sword had pierced her belly, and blood stained the broken ground. "Dad, too!" a familiar voice cried out as Suzuko burst forth, looking like a giant monster stitched together. Once the job was done, she cradled the tiny Leo in her palm and asked, "Is it all finished, Dad?" As sleepiness washed over her, leaving Suzuko to rub her eyes and hug her dad tightly while promising to protect him if he stayed with her. As Leo cried out for Suzuko one last time, she curled up and fell into a deep sleep among the tiny creatures. And just then, the dark tentacles vanished and the curse on him was gone. A ghostly voice echoed from the plant entity, hanging upside down from the ceiling, completely ignoring me, which explains why that girl calls you Dad. Leo didn't hesitate when facing the Black Forest's true boss. He instantly activated his skill, synchronization. The chosen power turned the boss into a cackling C-rank flower monster that shouted, "You're both my prey." The moment Leo turned into a ghost, his helper ability kicked in to make his body see-through for 20 minutes, letting him slip past the monster's deadly strike without a scratch. I could run away, but what about Suzuko? He knew he couldn't just leave her here like this. But the boss known as Whispering Flower saw through everything, his mocking voice telling you there is no escape. The Whispering Flower let out a wicked giggle, reminding me that every plant here is watching us. Mikey Leo suddenly realized with horror that the pretty flower's scent had poisoned him. The boy gave up, cursing as he realized he couldn't escape, while the monster ignored him to lift the sleeping girl's chin and whisper that she was beautiful when quiet, even licking her cheek gruesomely before declaring it was very particular about its food, causing Leo to realize in shock that it had been targeting her all along, which the whispering flower confirmed by saying it must evolve to regain favor, only for the monster to roar angrily at Leo's question and hiss that he must not dare insult him. Inside its mind, a picture formed of a mighty being, the god of monsters. It turned its gaze contemptuously on Leo, calling him a fake for raising a monster, and Leo stood stunned as it even revealed it knew he was just a keeper. It said with jealousy, "Suzuko is his girl, but she calls you dad. Want to copy him? That's so silly." The whispering flower sneered. Suddenly, Leo seemed to grasp the truth, smirking with confidence. "Now I see why I was made to raise monsters. It's so I can be your food, isn't it? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Leo's sudden reaction made Whispering Flower stop talking for a second. The monster grew into a giant shadow and demanded that you become its slave if you wanted to live. Leo jumped up and shouted, "That's a fantastic deal." But then he gave the finger and growled, and I simply refused to back down. The Whispering Flower licked its lips and let out a wild, happy laugh. "You have no say in this," it roared, its heavy presence wrapping around a Mikey Leo who was trapped by endless tentacles as he realized his special power would vanish in just 10 minutes. "I have to find a way to wake Suzuko," Leo thought. Then he turned into a blue streak of light and frantically searched for an escape. The boss commanded his team to grab the target alive, while in a different part of the battle, another player was screaming in terror as monsters closed in on them. Damn it! Leo ground his teeth while cold sweat poured down his face as things got worse. Trapped on all sides, he forced himself to think hard and wondered if there was any other way out. Just then, Leo saw that Mickey's job card had slipped out of Luca, who was lying still on the ground. A tiny spark of hope ignited in Luca's mind, and since he could use it, so could I, but as he lunged to grab the card, the system's crushing error snuffed out that chance, leaving us with no available job, and a frustrating, "Are you kidding me?" Suddenly, Leo's ghostly form vanished, and his real body reappeared, fully exposed. With a horde of monsters charging at him, he let out a final roar and shouted, "Synchronization, activate!" Leo's left eye burned crimson as Suzuko's hidden power woke up to try the same old trick, and the Whispering Flower sneered that it wouldn't let them succeed. A wave of dark power slammed down, forcing Leo to grab his head and fall to the ground in agony. The sync broke suddenly, and he lost all control over his own body. "Go to sleep," the boss whispered softly, "and die inside my memories." As Leo stared in horror through his red eye while his enemy twisted into a terrifying new shape that claimed his body with spectral tentacles, proving this was far more dangerous than any F-rank dungeon. In his last breath, he muttered with anger, wondering if his bitter fate of dying because of Suzuko in his past life was finally catching up to him again. Suddenly, the pain vanished, and Leo shot upward in surprise to find himself floating in an endless white void with his mismatched eyes wide open, staring at a glowing system screen that left him bewildered as he wondered where he was. Suddenly, a loud, happy voice called out from the dark, and then a strange white door appeared right before us. Leo didn't even pause before walking up to that door and pushing it open. Inside, a blurry scientist knelt among endless papers, and Leo stared in confused awe as a memory showed his eyes glowing maniacally, one red and one blue, just like his own. As Leo watched the scientists act so wildly, he couldn't help but picture his own past self. The man roared his command, a glowing red magic circle erupting among the papers, and his masterpiece suddenly appeared. A terrible feeling of dread hit Leo, making him hold his breath in the silence. From the middle of the circle, a tiny stitched hand reached out to touch the paper covered in blood. A little girl with long black hair and wide, confused red eyes sat up to ask her very first question. "What am I?" The scientist pointed at her and solemnly declared, "Listen, your name shall be Suzuko." And the innocent girl repeated her name with curious red eyes as the scientist reached out. She placed her hand in his to seal their bond. He embraced his creation and whispered, "From now on, call me Dad." And she happily replied, "Dad," until the memory shattered and Leo clutched his head in horror as gruesome images of Suzuko, screaming for food, reappeared. In the dark memory space, Amiki Leo gasped in shock. Is this for real? He forced himself to calm down and think clearly, realizing these were Suzuko's memories and that she looked so different. In the memory, the scientist with mixed-colored eyes smiled and told Suzuko, "You are your dad's masterpiece. Are you ready?" He patted the innocent girl's head, who only knew how to ask back, "Ready for what, Dad?" Ready to save this world with Dad? The scientist declared with a smug look. Just as Leo looked on, the picture in his mind exploded into tiny pieces of light. He felt a jolt of shock as he realized they were gone, wondering what the man from the SGD organization really wanted, while Leo smirked with a bad feeling that this was just the opening act to a trap, now marked by a glowing door that signaled he was walking straight into it. Even then, he didn't hesitate to turn the doorknob, driven by his resolve to see it all the way through. The door creaked open, and Suzuko stuck her head out to shout, "Long time no see, Dad, because she missed you so much." The memory shifted once more, and the scientist led Suzuko away, whispering that today her dad had something special to show her, but he stopped right before saying what it was called. He pointed to a flower trapped inside a glass cage, a strange thing with animal-like features that seemed to whisper secrets. Leo stopped in his tracks and realized that the man in charge was the boss of the Black Forest. The scientist thought to himself that his creation, far from being perfect like his beloved Suzuko, was still missing something vital and incomplete. A strange smile curved his lips as he thought hard about a tough problem. Seeing Dad look so worried, Suzuko quickly hugged him and promised to help him out. She lifted her clear eyes and asked, "Is there anything I can do?" Leo watched as the scientist said, "Thank you. I need your power, Suzuko. But if you don't want to, just tell me, and I'll find someone else," the scientist said, and Suzuko quickly answered, "I agree, but now I need to know what I must do." He grinned with a mean look and said, "I want something you have, Suzuko." Mike Leo stood frozen, wide-eyed and baffled by the strange challenge to see your eye. Little Suzuko beamed with a bright smile and said, "Yes." And without even thinking twice, she reached up and plucked out her own eye. All at once, Leo threw his head back and screamed in pain as his red eye began to throb terribly. Suzuko, her face smeared with blood, held up the eyeball and asked innocently if she was a good girl, while the tormenting pain in Leo's mind drove him to collapse from sheer agony. The scientist patted her head and called her a good girl, feeling so happy about helping her dad. Leo stared at the scene before him, muttering that it just couldn't be real. The man lifted his eye, and Suzuko saw the power it held. He commanded the waiting bud-shaped creature to swallow it. The bud swallowed the eyeball whole and instantly turned into the whispering flower, the tentacled monster Leo had just fought. Rage surged inside Leo, causing him to roar and dash at the illusion while shouting, "You bastard! How can you do this to your own child? You shout. You're a monster." He threw a hard punch, filled with anger, at the man Suzuko called her dad. But the punch just went right through the fake image, breaking the figures of the father and daughter apart. Leo crumbled to the ground, cursing himself for having a father like Suzuko's dad, a man who was nothing but a criminal. Leo grabbed his head and roared in agony, confused and scared because he could feel Suzuko hurting right inside him. Suddenly, strange doors popped up in the blank white space, leaving him completely amazed. Suddenly, a maze of doors popped up everywhere like mushrooms, turning the area into a wild and confusing mess. Leo froze in shock, realizing with horror that he hadn't touched them yet, but his world was already spiraling out of control. Just as the door swung wide, a bright white light swallowed him and showed him a terrifying memory. Deep inside, a young girl named Suzuko stood innocently as a monster ate her body parts while whispering for them to grow strong, stealing everything from her limbs to her memories. Yet she only asked the scientist if he was her father, while in reality, Mike Leo laughed insanely as his body cracked under unbearable pain. He fell to the ground, screaming in terror because the truth had finally come out. That girl is just food for monsters. In the memory, the broken Suzuko lay in a pool of blood, weakly whispering "Dad," as the scientist's false, gentle voice asked if she was okay, while Leo watched helplessly until the man appeared and a tiny spark of hope lit up her last eye. "Dad!" Suzuko cheered, struggling to pull her broken body toward him. "Did you finally come to visit?" The cold-blooded scientist grinned back. "I brought the whole family here, Suzuko, and they're all so happy to see you." Behind him lumbered a terrifying swarm of skull monsters, growling as they charged forward, encircling Suzuko, who trembled in fear and begged, "Who are they? Does Dad not need Suzuko anymore? You're broken beyond repair." The man turned away with cold finality, saying, "Forgive me, Suzuko," while heart-rending screams filled the air as the monsters tore at her body, and she cried out, "It hurts so much, Dad. Don't abandon Suzuko." Meanwhile, Leo laughed through his own tears as his body shattered, whispering, "Don't be afraid, Suzuko. I'm hurting too." He bowed his head in bitter disappointment and spoke the final, painful truth. Both of us were fooled, and neither of us is really a father. A system chime announced that the Eye of Truth was sinking, with the progress bar already halfway full. Mike Leo stood firm in his mind, holding back the pain that felt like it was breaking his soul apart. He clenched his teeth and promised, "I will become your true father." Leo's eyes snapped open with a wicked grin as he sneered, "Hey, ugly, it's a blast to see your hideous face again." The whispering flower roared in shock and asked, "How did you wake up?" It grabbed everything it could and pulled hard, letting out a scary growl while showing me what real hell looks like again. But Leo just laughed loudly in defiance, saying, "Come on, monster." The whispering flower answered back with confidence, daring to see how long that attitude would hold up before unleashing a furious blast of energy. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but Leo only mumbled that while it hurt, it was nothing compared to Suzuko's pain, and all he could think was synchronization. As the third stage of synchronization hit 80%, Leo shot up and covered one eye, declaring with an insane grin, "I'm back, so you can stop eating now," before tears of rage streamed down his face as he challenged his enemy. "If you intend to eat Suzuko, then I'll eat all of you," and immediately unleashed an invisible force that crushed the pack of skull monsters. Leo snatched one, his hand squeezing until its bloodshot eye burst. Then he let out a loud "Yahoo!" and ripped into his enemies with wild fury. He let out a mighty roar in the middle of the fight, shouting, "Give me a taste, you beasts," as a huge swarm of monsters with endless scary eyes charged forward to surround him. With the skull monsters charging straight across the ruined battlefield, Leo grimaced and muttered, "You guys taste like shit," while his mind fused with Mikey's at a 70% rate, only to feel his own corruption growing deeper. A fierce hunger surged through Leo as he roared and demanded more monsters, only for a white-haired female to grin menacingly and drag him into her memories, where he found himself hugging a small Suzuko who innocently called him father. Leo smiled, accepting his new destiny, for yes, he was not your father before, but now he is. All of a sudden, a blue ghost of the scientist popped out to laugh at me and warned, "This is just a memory of my own making, and even if you eat me, you'll still end up dead right here." That spirit warned Leo that swallowing a monster's was like drinking poison, meaning he wouldn't last long. The system panel flashed red because the sync rate hit 90%, pushing the mental corruption to a dangerous level. Leo's face twisted with new, unsettling features as he lunged at the scientist, shouting that he was Suzuko's father and that the scientist's memories were filthy. Leo broke the spell and faced the terrified boss, flashing a crazy grin while asking, "What are you?" before telling him not to be scared because he could put him to sleep like before, which instantly made the boss's tentacles loosen and free Leo. The young man stretched his arms out wide, taunting them with impatient shouts to hurry up and put them to use. The female monster was so terrified, she began sweating in a cold panic. Leo roared in fury, wanting to drag the scientist out for revenge, because who else could he share this pain with but you? His sheer determination had so overwhelmed the boss that a notification popped up, confirming that all the right conditions had been met. The system offered a last chance, but as Leo's crushing power pinned the C-rank boss, the female monster froze in horror, realizing she was completely stuck because his will was far too strong to resist. Mike Leo shouted proudly, "Look, this is your will. It makes me stronger." With a crazy grin, he pressed the button, and Leo spoke coldly, telling the girl monster that if she wouldn't play with him, she'd have to play with Suzuko, which made her scream in pure terror. Suzuko burst into her giant form, furious and asking who hurt her father, while Leo quickly told her that he's okay and asked her to go play instead. Leo got encouraged, and when you get bored, you can eat her, so Suzuko happily agreed and faced her enemy, growled, and asked, "Hey, who hurt father?" while the female monster quickly denied, saying, "It wasn't me." He got hurt, but when the female monster tried to explain, Suzuko just roared in fury and called her a liar. Lying is terrible, so Suzuko roared and smashed a devastating punch into her screaming enemy. Meanwhile, Leo stumbled upon Hayashi Mickey lying badly hurt and quickly asked, "Mickey, are you okay?" Panting on the floor, Mickey shouted, "Hey, Imogen, what are you really?" And Leo smiled back, saying, "I'm a dad to a stubborn daughter. It's gonna hurt, but you have to hold on," he said before gripping the sword hilt stuck in her. The sword was pulled free in a burst of fresh blood. Mickey's eyes rolled back from the searing pain. Right after that, she suddenly grabbed Leo and hit him right in the face. Mickey roared as he pinned him to the ground, screaming, "Are you still going to lie? You're working with that madman, aren't you?" She lifted her sword to strike him down, but Leo screamed out that Luca was the one who lied, begging her to trust him instead. Mickey stopped in her tracks, shocked to see the bleeding had suddenly stopped, just as Leo said, "If I were your enemy, I wouldn't have let you bleed." "This is just a temporary fix," Leo said. "So first, drop your sword." And after Hayashi Miki realized her mistake and apologized quickly, Suzuko went right back to enjoying the boss. Mike Leo nervously checked on Miki, asking if he was okay and if anything had changed about him. Not really, Miki said with a puzzled look, feeling fine and missing the strange thing right before him. Leo shouted a terrifying secret, and when Luca handed you your old job card, it meant your power had been taken away. Overwhelmed by panic, Miki grabbed Leo and shouted for help, but Leo smiled confidently and offered a risky plan that promised to save them if Miki would lend him his power. Miki didn't hesitate a second and said yes, then asked Leo what she needed to do, leaving him a bit surprised at just how quickly she had decided. You helped me anyway, and I trust you, Miki said, making Leo's heart swell with warmth as he smiled. Leo wondered if Suzuko was just too trusting or truly stupid, so he slapped his hand down on the ground and shouted, Suzuko, a huge figure is here, and she immediately agreed. Yes, Tilda, before Miki fell flat on his face, completely crushed by the monster's scary power. She jumped to a silly conclusion. He called her dad, and now he knows this is Himijin's daughter. Leo smiled and said, Suzuko, I need your help. Leo asked about the woman, and when Suzuko said she'd already eaten her, he coaxed her to spit her out for a moment so he could offer something tastier instead. Okay, Suzuko happily agreed, bringing her sharp claws to her stomach. Look away, Miki, he screamed, diving in to shield Leo's eyes. Suzuko ignored her and ripped open her stomach to show a huge mouth inside, from which she pulled out the boss. Miki tumbled backward in sheer terror, while Leo merely scratched his head and chuckled, praising Suzuko as the white-haired boss was knocked to the ground, lying still in a puddle of slime, completely under control. The boss lay crumpled on the ground, defeated and shaking like a leaf. Mike Leo sat down quietly, but spoke his request directly to Miki. He gave a freezing smile and spoke his last word. It must be destroyed. The boss roared, Don't you dare underestimate me, as a violent burst of dark green energy from the ground raised the dead players into an army of ghouls. A whole army of the dead surged forward with a single, hungry goal, to rip the living apart. Hayashi Miki gasped in shock as she stared at the crowd, whispering that they had come back to life and that there were so many of them. Suzuko squinted with her fiery red eyes, eagerly asking if she could eat them, but Leo just gave a cold, calm, no need, leaving her only with a furious roar in response. When I die, you're coming with me. The boss laughed wildly, ready to pull its enemy down to the grave. Just do your best to survive, it challenged as a sphere of green light formed in Leo's palm. That's right, Leo smirked as strange cracks started spreading across his face. A rush of green power spread over the battlefield and swallowed the monster that had come back to life. The monsters suddenly stopped dead, their dead eyes glowing bright as they shuffled forward like puppets on a string. They came to a sudden halt, and Hayashi Miki let out a long breath of relief, staring in disbelief. She spun around to ask him, Himijin, what did you do? But Leo just gave a lazy H in return. As she finally saw his face, Miki let out a terrified scream and cried out, What did you do to your face? This is a corrupted mind I must accept, Leo said while Suzuko whispered as his dad suddenly grabbed the stunned girl's hand and shouted, Help me. Miki looked worried, but Hayashi Miki patted Leo's head affectionately, scolding him like a little brother to stop his tough act, while Leo grumbled that his mental age was older, pointing at the subdued boss and explaining that the Black Forest dungeon, usually easy to enter and leave, had become much harder thanks to Luca. He pretended Luca had brainwashed everyone to win the bounty, while secretly trying to hide Suzuko's part. Meanwhile, Suzuko squeezed the screaming boss's arm tighter, refusing to let him escape. Leo held out a knife, showing that he wanted to fight a C-rank boss to get a special item. And that's exactly what you need right now, he said, making Miki smile with purpose, while Hayashi Miki drew her long sword and boldly declared, Leave the rest to me. She turned to the giant monster and promised Suzuko that she would take it down, asking only that it be released, and she received the monster's instant agreement. The boss hit the ground hard, completely unable to move as the sharp blade waited to strike him. With a shout that seemed to tear the sky apart, Hayashi Miki swung her sword and hit the monster right on its head. The system panel flashed an error message because it couldn't see Miki as a dungeon clearer, since she was just an ordinary player. Right after that, the system fixed itself, realized Mike Leo had finished the dungeon, and he broke into a happy smile. Suzuko beamed with pride. Himin, I took it down, but Leo could only sigh, yeah, thanks, before whispering to Miki that he needed to keep his true identity a secret while standing before the system panel to hide his personal details and pick a new name. He tapped his finger across the screen to type Innkeeper, just as the system started handing out rewards. Just then, Leo whispered into the mic, "Let's grant Mikini's wish," and suddenly Hayashi Miki found herself tied up, panic rising in her voice as she asked, "What are you doing?" With Leo smiling triumphantly while holding up a blue core that was exactly what the boss needed, an elemental monster core. Hayashi Miki asked with a doubtful frown, "How do I use this? Please don't tell me I have to swallow it." With eyes flashing red, Leo confirmed it was true, leaving Miki stunned and asking, "You're kidding, right?" Suddenly, Miki coughed up blood and felt her body tearing apart inside, which made Leo scream in horror before he saw her knee. When Miki fell down, Suzuko asked if she was dead so she could eat her, but Leo quickly said no. "No," Leo asked, worriedly helping his gasping teammate, only to get a terrified reply. "I can't feel anything. Am I dying?" "It's all right," Leo said, clenching his fist as green power gathered in his palm, shining with ancient, glowing marks, and promising to help just for a moment. "I won't let you die," Leo whispered as he carefully fed the monster core into Mickey's mouth. With no other way out, the young girl swallowed the gem, holding onto a tiny chance to stay alive. Golden cores were worth a fortune, but right now they only needed pure power, so elemental energy erupted around them, and Leo sighed with relief. "Good, it's working." Leo told the user that if they could erase the boss's will, they would be able to take in the purest power of the elements. But something felt off because Mickey was floating in midair, engulfed by a huge surge of energy, and Leo realized in horror that she was being controlled by the elemental power, so a violent explosion threw him backward until Suzuko's giant hand caught him. "Suzuko!" Leo yelled, but the Dungeon Queen just stared at Mickey with burning hate, claiming the woman dared harm their dad and was unforgivable. "Can I eat her?" she asked with sharp teeth bared in hunger. Yet Leo firmly reminded her that she promised not to eat humans. The Queen smiled contentedly and called Leo kind, while he shivered from her changed aura, fearing he might get eaten if he wasn't careful. So he asked if she would protect him from danger, prompting her to roar that she would always protect Papa. Leo put Suzuko aside for a moment and stared at the trapped Mickey, his heart racing with worry as he searched for a way to wake her up. He decided to ignore the scary boss and trust only himself, pouring his strength right into his hand. But his hard work was in vain, for his power couldn't stretch far enough to touch Mickey. Despair filled Leo's eyes as he realized that Mickey's body wouldn't last much longer at this pace. Suddenly, his own power backlashed in pain, forcing him to mutter, "Damn it," before admitting he still needs Suzuko to get through this. With no other choice, Leo turned to shout, "Suzuko, give me a hand," and before the Queen could even ask, he gave a wild order, "Throw me at her." Suzuko didn't hesitate, simply said, "Yes, Papa," and used her giant hand to firmly grab him. Leo screamed in terror as he felt the huge amount of power building up in Suzuko's arm, which was moving so slowly. Suzuko shouted, "Fly, Tilda," and tossed Leo into the air so fast he became a cannonball, while Leo just yelled into the wind, not slow at all, but well done. He smashed straight into the glowing green bubble that was hugging Mickey. A huge boom blew everything apart, filling the air with thick clouds of smoke and dust. Through the thick smoke, Leo pushed forward, holding onto Mickey and shouting her name with panic. "Wake up," he yelled, but the only answer was the girl's cold, glowing eyes. A quick snap of her fingers woke Hayashi Miki from her daydream. "You're finally awake." Mike Leo smiled with relief as the groggy girl asked what had happened. Mickey turned red, feeling silly and embarrassed that she was sitting there half-naked among the vines and almost looking like a vegetable. "Don't look," she screamed in panic, but Leo swiftly turned his head away and insisted, "I didn't see a thing." The awkward silence faded, and Mickey stared anxiously at Leo's hand, wondering if the dark corruption growing inside him had finally made things much worse. Just then, Suzuko burst in, her eyes wild with murderous rage, growling, "You wicked woman! I will not forgive you." "Stop it, Suzuko," Leo said calmly as he stood in front of her. "She's Papa's friend." After soothing his devoted daughter, he turned around and handed over a gift, saying, "Oh, right. Here." Mickey was stunned to get her job card back when Leo told her, "You can use it now." Leo gave one final order, telling Suzuko to keep their meeting a secret before he stepped away into the night. Mickey, dressed in a fresh new outfit, called out to him and asked for his name. She pressed hard, asking if his fake name and hidden secrets were all for Suzuko's son, then stared with determination to know if he was human or a monster, while Leo grinned with a spooky look as his face briefly twisted. Carried in Suzuko's arms like a doll, he challenged, "What do you think?" While the tense air around them made Suzuko innocently declare, "Papa is Papa," leaving Mickey completely bewildered. "My name is Mikey Leo," the mysterious boy whispered as he and his guardian disappeared into the swirling mist. Mickey smiled, whispering the name Mike Leo over and over, as if carving it into his memory. Just then, a system alert blared, causing the dungeon floor to suddenly crack and shatter. A speedrunner blasted through the dungeon in just 23 minutes and 50 seconds. The news that hit them all so hard had them staring at each other, mouths open and asking, "What did you just say?" As pieces of space broke apart, the crowd roared with joy while the dungeon disappeared. The leaderboard refreshed, and a fresh name took the top spot, Keeper. Even 10 hours after the Black Forest dungeon was taken, the city was still in chaos. But when a strange group from the Manifestation Association showed up at the subway station, it was already too late. A giant hand squeezed so hard the earth split open in rage. As the two-headed monster stared at his fallen friend, he muttered about the clean cut, while another beast roared in anger at the cruelty before Bon Ren commanded silence to analyze the missing core and the killer's knowledge of their weakness, only for their cold leader Felmina to declare the loss of a member to the Manifestation Association, revealing her deep connection to the monster god. She turned to the deformed subordinate and asked, "Shell, can you recreate the image from before she died?" The one-eyed monster bowed without a word, asking only if there was anything else Ango needed. A stream of red energy burst from Shell's huge eye, warping the space around it into a wild swirl of memories. During the flashback, Mike Leo showed up trapped in tentacles, begging us to let go faster before his face twisted into a monster with 100 eyes and he screamed out the name Monster God. In a twisted memory, a screaming, distorted Mike Leo made Felmina cry out, "Monster," which shocked Bonandrin into realizing she was killed by a human child. As rage built in his voice, the scene shifted to show a giant, angry Suzuko demanding to know who hurt her papa, leaving Felmina frozen with the terrifying truth that the monster was actually called Papa by the Queen of Destruction. The terrified monsters realized that since a human could hold the queen, he had to be something far greater than anyone expected. A sudden idea hit Felmina, making her realize that the one standing above even the monster gods was the leader they had been looking for. A wild hope sparked inside us, and Felmina's loud laughter showed that even we survivors need a monster like him to keep the darkness at bay. The female leader's power exploded in a rage that blasted her stunned team right out of her way. After calming herself, Felmina shouted that they had to find the Great One, ordered her most human-looking servant Dala to investigate his motives, and watched as a female monster turned into a beautiful lady to bow and accept the honor. With sharp eyes, Dal whispered, "Big sister," just as shocking news began to spread through the Jobholder Association headquarters in Gitzeron City. The staff couldn't stop talking about Keeper, who had blasted through the twisted dungeon in just one day, leaving them to argue if anyone could really do that. Hayashi Miki stood nearby and muttered about the strange name of the hero rising before her, a hero named Leo. Suddenly, a woman dressed for work stepped up and said, "I'm Jenna from the cooperative, Miss Hayashi Miki, and I'd love to ask you a few things." At the association, Jenna smiled meaningfully and said it was about the Black Forest, asking if Hayashi Miki was from there too, but he flinched and looked away even though she knew she had already reported everything and was now focusing only on the player keeper. Suddenly, Mickey's mind was overwhelmed by memories of Mikey Leo and the huge monster Suzuko. She quietly remembered the secret about Suzuko he had given her to stay hidden, while at the same time, weird tentacles started to grow out of the ground in an empty hotel right in the middle of the city. After the battle, Mike Leo sat among the ruins to check his status board. He let out a long sigh when he saw that his dreaded guardian was still at Frank, even though his level had gone up and the spiritual corruption was still causing trouble. As a reward for clearing the dungeon, he received a special crystal that could copy abilities. Leo couldn't help but stare in shock at just how rare the item he'd just gotten really was. With a thought, the crystal turned into a green, glowing sword. It turned into a bow, yet Leo set that joy aside to tackle something far more serious. He remembered the Defiled Eye, a terrifying tentacled monster's prize that held the memories of Suzuko. Leo called out to Suzuko, and she popped up right away with a sweet reply. He smiled warmly and held out an eye glowing with a dark red light, inviting her to step closer as he offered it as a gift. He set the eye on her chest, and Suzuko whispered, "Father," as she felt her body finally come together. Right away, Suzuko's eyes burst with a fierce red glow. A huge burst of power exploded, making her scream as she felt a very strange sensation. Even Mikey Leo had to shield his face from the crushing weight of that power, only to realize with a jolt that the father he remembered wasn't him at all. A worried thought took hold as he tightened his grip on his weapon, fearing she might no longer see him as her father. He held his breath, ready for the worst, as huge hands reached out to grab him. Suzuko gave him a warm hug and whispered that she loved him, which made Leo realize he had been worrying for nothing. All right, put me down, the young man cried in embarrassment as he tried to push away the giant face. After a moment, Leo stepped forward to check on Suzuko, only to see the status board flashing a corrupted rank monster, which made him scream out in sudden pain. A wild burst of green power exploded from him, making him growl as those troublesome side effects struck again. 3 extra red eyes popped onto his face as he clenched his teeth, making him wonder if his willpower had suddenly slipped out of control. The pain was too much, and Leo crumpled to the floor, leaving Suzuko stunned as she realized it was their father. With a new body of many arms, she frantically charged forward, clearly terrified by what she saw. Suzuko nervously stared down at Leo's lifeless body, his hands still glowing with a strange, ghostly light. She carefully lifted him, believing he was just tired, only to notice the dark stain on his arm and realize he was hurt. She laid Leo on the bed and blamed herself for not being able to protect him, promising him a quick recovery with glowing red eyes, which instantly reminded her of a time when a young her asked her real father in a lab coat what he was doing and what utopia meant, leaving a mysterious smile hidden behind digital pixels. In a quiet memory, his father softly spoke to little Suzuko about a perfect world full of hope. Back in reality, Suzuko stood quietly by the bed, her shadow covering the daydreaming Mikey Leo as she gently held his hand, creating a silent bond between them. Lying down beside the one she had chosen, a new realization suddenly dawned in her mind, and I remember now. With a calm smile and a tear rolling down her cheek, she spoke her truth. Her father was still her father, and she was still Suzuko. The morning sun peeked through the window to wake a Mike Leo, whose heavy eyes slowly opened to a hazy new day. He jerked awake, fighting off a pounding headache while trying to put together the scary things he remembered from yesterday. He remembered the mental corruption as a nightmare, where demonic wings sprouting from his back horrified him. He looked up to see an even scarier view, hundreds of Suzuko's heads staring at him and shouting together, "Is that okay? What the hell?" A terrifying idea raced down the young man's spine. The trick faded away to reveal just one Suzuko dangling upside down from the ceiling, leaving Leo completely baffled by her strange behavior. Staring at his twisted arm, Leo knew things were getting worse and muttered, "Damn it, I'm starting to see things that aren't there. I can't keep going like this." So he closed his eyes and used his will to push back the dark energy spreading through him. His eyes shone bright green while he used all his thoughts to tame the wild energy swirling around him. Then the strange, scary designs on his arm slowly disappeared, leaving him in a rare moment of peace. Leo stood tall with his new strength, remembering how he used a train to make his old skills work with this fresh power. But his quick flash of confidence vanished instantly as someone hugged him from behind, and Suzuko cried out, "Dad, Tilda!" With glowing red eyes and a wide, toothy grin, she made her first request, while Suzuko hugged a hungry Tilda tightly from behind as Mike Leo asked in confusion, "Is anyone else from the previous group here?" He wondered if remembering her father had turned her back into a child. Leo quietly figured it out just as Suzuko stepped forward, tugged her shirt up to show her nearly empty stomach, and sighed that only a tiny bit of crystal remained from the black forest monster. "You've nearly finished the whole lot." Leo grinned with love, teasing her for being such a glutton. He saw a chance to make a fortune because Suzuko could turn dead monsters into valuable crystals. Leo promised to buy her tasty food if she would give him these crystals to sell. Suzuko beamed with joy and said yes right away. The scene changes to the busy city of Getzeron, where the worker cooperative has set up shop. Mikey Leo, dressed in a brand new outfit, strolled down the street alongside Suzuko, who glowed softly as a spirit. He chose to stay away from the cooperative and do business on the black market instead. Even though that illegal market in the dungeon had only opened a week ago, it was already crowded and busy. Leo's eyes locked onto a man named Tokurakuro, the person who would rule the city a decade from now. He stepped closer while Takuro bragged about his strength and offered to sell some dungeon treasures, only to get a look full of disgust and doubt from Takuro. "Get lost." The engineer waved his hand, saying he didn't want trouble from stolen goods, while Suzuko whispered her dislike for him, and Leo calmly replied that they would see they weren't stolen once he showed his hand, which held green crystals glowing with pure energy. Tokurakuro's face went pale, and he stammered in sheer amazement, wondering what kind of crystal this could possibly be. Leo calmly offered his monster crystals, but Tokurakuro shook his head in doubt, refusing to buy anything from such a strange source. Despite his doubts, he decided to take a look and press the button on his magic scanner to start the check. The results popped up, revealing a rare black forest crystal from Kyo with 20% purity that could be worth up to 10,000 gold. Tokurko's face went pale, and his words stumbled as he asked, "Black forest? How did you get such a perfect item?" Leo just smirked, saying that his trick was a secret art and asking if you were ready to buy or if he should find another customer. Right away, the engineer changed his mind and reached out his hand, saying, "I'll take them all. I am Tokurokuro." Leo shook hands to seal the deal and slipped the entire batch's 100,000 gold into his pocket. As Leo left the market holding his phone, the confirmed payment made him smile and think, that's enough for Suzuko's food, and now she can enjoy a feast, while memories of his own past struggles for survival brought a warm feeling to his heart. Suddenly, Suzuko's spirit form whispered a warning. "Dad, someone's following us." "Lao,